Just to start off, is there anything you would like to tell us about yourself and your initiative and FASD Hope?
Sure. So my name is Natalie Vecchione, and I am the mom of two. Our son is 19 and has a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and our daughter is 6. We adopted both of our kids, and FASD stands for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is a spectrum diagnosis. FASD itself is not the actual diagnosis. There are 5 diagnoses that fall under the FASD umbrella, but FASD stands for the brain-based disabilities that are, and it's a whole body. Not only is it a brain-based diagnosis, but a whole body disorder caused by prenatal alcohol exposure. And FASD is the most common cause of developmental a recent study done by Dr. Philip May at the University of Chapel Hill in North Carolina studied first graders and in different communities. And the conservative estimate, what he found was that about 2 to 5% of first graders have an FASD. So it's much more common than people are aware of. So FASD, before I answer about FASD Hope, I just kind of want to explain FASD because it is related to what you all do with Mind to Mind. FASD, what happens when an unborn child is exposed to alcohol is that it damages the brain anytime during the pregnancy. So no amount of alcohol at any time is safe for an unborn child during pregnancy. And FASD is a preventable developmental disability. So I think there's a lot of what is happening in FASD advocacy is getting out that no amount of alcohol is safe during pregnancy. And it's challenging because we know that approximately 51% of pregnancies in the United States are unplanned. And we also know that COVID has exacerbated drinking by about, I believe the last statistic I read was about 41% among women who are of childbearing age. So you've got these, factors that it's FASD is already a public health crisis, but this is, the COVID pandemic will exacerbate it even more. So what happens during pregnancy when an unborn child is exposed to alcohol is it affects, every system in their body, and it causes disabilities that are lifelong, developmental disabilities. It crosses the limbic system. It affects, it decreases the myelin sheath in neurons so that memory is impaired. So sometimes, there's inconsistent memory because of brain damage. So sometimes a child, an individual is able to recall something and sometimes they're not. So what we consider it to be is really prenatal brain injury from alcohol. So, and with brain injury and traumatic brain injury, not only does it affect the brain, but it causes symptoms in a lot of other, domains. And it causes deficits and difficulties in things like executive functioning, so carrying out, tasks, things like adaptive functioning, memory, of course. It's pretty much just about every domain in functioning is affected by alcohol. So we really appreciate sharing FASD awareness and sharing advocacy with people who, like yourself and Mind to Mind, who do brain injury advocacy, because there are many parallels with FASD and with, traumatic brain injury or any other type of brain injury. So there are 5, it's a spectrum disorder. It looks different with everybody. Only about 10 to 20% of individuals with FASD have outward facial characteristics or outward characteristics. So just like TBI and just like brain injury, it's an invisible disability. People don't know it until you start interacting with that individual. So there are 5 diagnoses underneath the FASD umbrella. There's fetal alcohol syndrome, which is what most people are aware of. That's where you have the facial characteristics. That's where the individual is very impaired. And that is what most people think of when they think of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, but that's just one of several diagnoses. So there's fetal alcohol syndrome, there's partial fetal alcohol syndrome, there's neurobehavioral disorder associated with prenatal alcohol exposure, or NDPAE, and then there are alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder, and then finally alcohol-related birth defects. So FASD really, it's a brain-based disorder with behavioral symptoms. And we also know that with TBI, we think of some things that are behaviors that are like willful behaviors when they're actually symptoms of the brain injury. And it's the same thing with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. What families and caregivers and loved ones and teachers often think are, and I'm using air quotes, willful behaviors, are actually symptoms of the brain being impacted from the prenatal alcohol exposure. So that's a really long answer, but that's what FASD is. Our son, we learned about we were told that he possibly had fetal alcohol exposure when he was 2, but we actually didn't get a confirmed diagnosis until he was 15. So there were 13 years that we were trying to get a diagnosis and we couldn't. And in the meantime, you know, other diagnoses were piling up, but again, when you know, a doctor would suggest a treatment or this and that, it wouldn't work. So it wasn't until we received the FASD diagnosis that we were able to connect all the dots. So not only does FASD impact the brain, it also, I believe the statistic is 93% of individuals that have an FASD also have a co-occurring mental illness. And then FASD, because it's a brain-based whole body disorder, there are over 400 comorbid medical conditions associated with FASD. So it really affects everything. So again, we didn't learn about our son actually having FASD. We didn't get the diagnosis until he was 15. And then we took training, you know, we received education. We really learned what is considered the gold standard in the FASD community is really thinking of brain-based, brain-first parenting, caregiving, teaching. So really meeting that individual where he or she is at on a cognitive basis, on an executive functioning basis, which is really important because that's where the most impairments you see, you know, will happen. And then on a developmental basis, because FASD is a developmental disability. So meeting that person where he or she is at developmentally. So say they have a chronological age of, let's say 10, but developmentally that child may be about 4 or 5. So meeting where they're at developmentally and, you know, making supports and accommodations and providing proper interventions. And also at the same time, FASD is a spectrum. So like other brain-based diagnoses, you're not going to have like this consistent, you know, line of disability. There are going to be, of course, just like with anybody, there are going to be strengths and there are going to be skills and talents. So somebody, you know, may have a developmental age, say, you know, a chronological adult may have a developmental age of 25, and maybe social emotionally they have a developmental age more of maybe like 14 or 15. But maybe that person is really skilled in, say, art and, you know, can pretty much be like a professional artist. That's really common because we know in brain-based diagnoses or brain-based injuries or brain-based disabilities, there are certain parts of the brain that are really can really shine, that can really just help that individual, live a fuller life, live a life that is focuses on them and not the disability. So it was a very lonely journey for our family. And my husband and I started FASD Hope as a podcast and as a resource website a year ago. We'll be celebrating our year anniversary of FASD Hope October 1st. And I co-wrote a book with a fellow mom who she has 5 children, 3 of whom have an FASD. And we talk about how we each, because we were both homeschoolers, we each took different routes in teaching our kids. Our son is an aspiring young woodworker. He's opening a small woodworking business here, where we live. My friend, who's our co-author, Cindy LaJoy, she and her family formed a pizza and ice cream restaurant in Montrose, Colorado, called Buckaroo Slices and Scoops. So our book focuses on our journeys. We share our journeys. We share about FASD and brain-based diagnoses. And most importantly, we talk about how we really need to rethink brain-based diagnoses and brain-based disabilities, not as just that, those deficits, those needs, but yes, supporting those, but also finding those gifts, finding those talents, finding those skills, because those are really going to help the individual, again, have a more fulfilled life and feel more valued. So I've been busy between the podcast, the book, our family, just, we've been busy, but I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to talk about FASD with you.
Yes, definitely. The work that you've done is so, so amazing, Natalie. And when I read your blog post, you just seem like a super mom with how you've homeschooled and really learned to work and accommodate for your children. So
thank you. I'm definitely not a super mom. I'm kind of like just a really type A busy mom. And I also thank you. I appreciate the compliments, the kind words. I really just my husband and I wanted to share our journey with our son's permission, so that other people would feel less isolated, because we know, especially when you have a diagnosis that is not like an outward diagnosis where people don't see, their expectations of you are different. And then when you interact with them, then you feel even more isolated. So it is a very it's a very lonely journey. So I think by our sharing, sharing blogs, being on interviews, talking, having the podcast and the book, we really just want to communicate to other families that they're not alone. No matter how, whether it's a developmental disability, whether it's a brain injury, whether it's traumatic brain injury, we want people to know that we're on this road too. And it's a different road, but it can be a beautiful road, especially if you look at things outside of the box.
yes, that's very good advice for everyone, honestly.
Thank you.
So when you were homeschooling your children, and can you talk a little bit more about how the small achievements that you had on this journey, what they meant to you, what they meant to your family?
Absolutely. So in homeschooling our kids, and I say kids affectionately because our son's 19, we really, and we share this in our book, we really learned that we need to celebrate the smaller victories. So for us, that might mean, hey, our son, did something that we've been working on for a while. Or maybe just, sometimes development comes out in these little sparks where you're just like, oh, wow, hey, okay, you're ready for this. So my husband and I kind of have this little motto, and it's on our website. We like to savor the moments. So throughout our homeschool journey with our son, he's done with homeschool. Now we're homeschooling our daughter. We find that like there's these little victories that we need to just celebrate. And I think that we need to, I guess, just in general, this is not only for people that love and care for people with, brain-based injuries or diagnoses, but just in general, I think we need to stop looking at, okay, was this a good day or a bad day? And then just kind of step back from that and say, okay, these were some really awesome moments that happened, during the day or along our journey or anything like that. And really appreciate those and use those as fuel. And I know that's really applicable to, to TBI and to brain-based diagnoses too, because there are going to be moments where you're just going to, wonder, is it just going to be like this every day? And then, the next day happens and something amazing happens. So I think it's really important. And I'm guilty of this. I will I'll be like, oh my gosh, this is never going to change. And, this is never going to, and instead of getting into that thinking mindset as a parent caregiver, just stepping back and saying, okay, I'm just going to kind of let this go. Tomorrow's another day. And if something doesn't happen tomorrow, that's okay. But to celebrate the little victories that happen throughout our day. So for us, it was just really creating a homeschool journey for our son and now our daughter that really focuses on their strengths and supports their needs. So our son, math was really not, it was challenging for him because of his brain-based, diagnoses, his FAS, having an FASD. So when he discovered his love for woodworking and carpentry, we were like, oh, hey, there's a lot of math in that. And he's actually really good at carpentry. So when he apprenticed with both of his teachers, and now he's starting to do this on his own, he would just measure something, a fraction to like the 32nd of an inch, whereas, a few years prior, he wasn't even able to do fractions. So when you can tap into somebody's really, their skill set or something they're really passionate about, you can help build up those needs through that. So we did that a lot in woodworking and in carpentry. Our last 2 years of homeschooling for our son, we really focused on, those victories that he made and those strides that he made in woodworking, carpentry. And then he's also very good at computer coding. He loves computer coding. So again, it seems like random things, but for his brain, that's how he can connect. So I would definitely recommend, if you're a parent, caregiver, loved one, or just somebody who wants to support somebody that has a brain-based diagnosis, really just don't look at, you're in it for the long haul. It's a long journey. It's not like this short little sprint and it's over. It's a long journey. So really just take those moments, those wonderful moments and those victories when they happen, and use them as fuel to help you keep going on the days when, things are just not happening.
Yep, definitely. And it's so amazing to see the growth that your son has and how he's found what he loves to do, because many people can't even do that.
Yeah, and I'm really appreciative that we were able to do that through homeschooling. And our daughter, even though she's 6, she really has a love for art and for singing and just creating. She's very creative. So I'm really thankful that we're able to focus on that, in her homeschool journey. And if you're not able to homeschool, you can still do that, in the evenings and the weekends. If you're a parent or friend, caregiver, loved one, you can still be curious. Just because somebody has a brain-based disability or a brain-based diagnosis, they're still curious. They still will explore, and it may be different, but I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind is you want to kind of keep that spark of and that joy. There's always going to be that frustration. There's always going to be, those times where maybe somebody's perseverating or just having a really difficult day. Try to find the joy in the curiosity and what makes them happy or what makes them feel, like, hey, I'm doing this and this is pretty cool.
Yes. So, Natalie, I also saw the amazing podcast that you and your husband have made, and how many guest speakers you have on your show. So, with them, is that what you hope to see with their families and their children, or who they're taking care of, the same growth that you've seen in your family? What are your goals of FASD Hope?
So FASD Hope, our first of all, and I appreciate your compliments. I don't see us as a success story. I see us as success in progress. I think success is also a spectrum, and it's not like a destination. It's really like a journey. So our goals for FASD Hope, our mission, I should say, every organization, brand, nonprofit, anything, you should always have a mission. So our mission for FASD Hope is threefold. Through our podcast, we hope to bring awareness of FASD, especially to those who are not directly, involved in the FASD community. But the statistics show that, it's more prevalent than other brain-based diagnoses like autism and Down syndrome. So you probably know somebody that has an FASD, that's how prevalent it is. But so to raise awareness, both in and out of the FASD community, our second mission is to provide information through our podcast, through our interviews with different people just from all over, not just in the FASD community, but those who can help the FASD community or those who have been touched by the FASD community. And then also my husband created this website that we're constantly updating to provide, organization information. We are parents with 19 years of lived experience. So we're not coming at this as professionals. We're just coming at this as like, hey, like we're this sign in the middle of the road that's just telling you if you're looking for something, this is kind of the way to go. And then finally, I think this is the biggest thing, and I hope your audience can appreciate this. I think the biggest thing that we want to do is to give people hope, and that's why we purposely put FASD and hope in our title, because when you hear about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, you usually don't hear about hope. You think of statistics, you think of, the disability aspect of it. You think of, the tertiary characteristics, things like, the early death rates, the things like, addiction, all those tertiary and even secondary characteristics that accompany FASD. And while we recognize that's there, we're not sugarcoating, we're not, downplaying those things. We wanted to have in the conversation hope, and hope looks different for everybody. For us, for my husband and myself, we really share about our faith and how faith has played our role in our journey. And we also share that hope really not only for us comes from our faith, but comes from knowing that there are others on this journey that can support us and that we can support them. And I have to say that the people who have been the most helpful on our son's FASD journey, on our family's journey, were not the people that, were supposed to be helpful, like the clinicians and the therapists and everything like that. Don't get me wrong, we've had, some very helpful professionals, but the people who really been the most helpful have been other parents, other families, other loved ones. They're the ones who understand the journey. So they were the ones that gave us hope, when times were much darker and we were still just trying to navigate a diagnosis. So we're nowhere near done. We're still on this journey, but we hope that what we can do is provide that hope for those families who are just starting, just getting a diagnosis, where we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago.
True. And especially the awareness aspect that you've talked about, that your organization is really looking at. I've learned about FASD through you, so I think you're doing a great job with awareness.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm happy that if more people just are aware of FASD and know what it is, and know the prevalence and know the importance of, giving individuals support and interventions and just appropriate, things that will help that individual. I feel like that, we're meeting our goal. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
So September, like you also said in your blog post, is FASD Awareness Month. So what is special that you're doing this month, or what are your plans for this month?
So FASD Hope was a sponsor in the first ever, and it's going to be an annual event. It's called Run FASD, Run Fast Virtual 5K. We had a virtual 5K. It was all over the country to support FASD. I've also, I'm doing 2 episodes a week, which is just really wild. I've kind of been doing that pace for a while. I do plan on slowing down. I've just been doing more, appearing more on, people's podcasts, interviews, just talking more about FASD. And I think something that's really important that I've been helping out with is there is national legislation that actually has been proposed here in the States for FASD. It's called the FASD Respect Act, HR 4151 SB 2238. And it's a national legislation. We're gaining co-sponsors and senators and legislators. It's national legislation that recognizes FASD as a diagnosable developmental disability, which is huge, which that is very huge. And then providing research funds for research, prevention, intervention, supports, and just services. So it's really exciting. I'm really hoping and praying that will, hopefully by, October, November, we'll see it pass, and then we can take our next steps into FASD awareness and advocacy. So yeah, I've been pretty busy.
Wow, I've never heard about this new legislature before. It's really interesting that everyone is supporting this, and I really hope it passes too.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll be a great thing, when it passes, because it'll recognize FASD the way autism and the way other, developmental disabilities are recognized and researched and supported and accommodated.
Okay. And I don't want to take up too much of your time today because you are very busy. But if there's anything else you want to say to our audience, anything you want to tell us about yourself, please go ahead.
Sure. I just appreciate this opportunity to talk and to share FASD awareness with you. I really hope that whoever's listening, if you are struggling on your journey with having a brain-based diagnosis or being a loved one of someone that has a brain-based disability, a brain-based injury, a brain-based diagnosis, just know that that person, their mind, and somebody kindly and gently but lovingly reminded me of this, their mind is working like about 5 to 10 times harder than, a typically developing or a mind that hasn't been impacted by an injury or a diagnosis. So I think we need to have grace on our loved one, on that person we're caring for, and know that they're really trying their best. And I think we also have to have grace on ourselves. You know, we're human, we make mistakes. And I am the first one to say, to be completely transparent and say, I make so many mistakes. And, you know, I think that we need to just keep reminding ourselves on this journey just to take things, you know, little by little, if not one day at a time, you know, one afternoon, one morning, one evening at a time. um, and to also just find the joy in the little things. I think that, again, if we look at FASD, traumatic brain injury, brain-based diagnoses, brain-based injuries, if we look at it through a lens of, it's not that somebody won't do something or somebody doesn't want to do something, but somebody just is physically not able to do that, you know, because of the brain being impacted. So if we look at them, you know, through this lens, and also in that lens, looking at that person as the whole person. So seeing their strengths, seeing their superpowers, seeing those skills and talents and things like that, rather than keeping on focusing on, you know, what the deficits are, what, you know, that kind of thing. I think if we can change the scope and look at them differently. And oftentimes I know the world sees our loved ones as different and looks at them in a different lens. And it's important for us not to let that get to us, because we know that our loved one has a good heart, or has this wonderful, you know, talent, or has this, you know, superpower. If we can, something that will help you along this journey. And just, again, to remember that this is a marathon. So you got to keep yourself renewed and replenished and restored during this marathon. It's not a sprint. But on that same note, there's a lot of beauty along the way in that long journey that others on the fast road may not be able to see.
Wow, your words are really beautiful and inspirational. It really opens my eyes to the other perspectives that I've never seen before. So thank you for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you.
I'll stop the recording.